Ladies and gentlemen, it's half past 3, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our joint conference of Martens Center and the EPP group in the Committee of Regions, EU climate targets. As we have very high-level set of speakers, so very briefly introduced before we start. Madam Sari Valtio, President of the EPP Group in the European Committee of the Regions. Welcome. Mr. Konstantinos Pagogiannis, who is the chair of the Committee of Regions in the Commission and chair of Nea Demokratia in city of Athens, leader of opposition, as the name goes. Marko Markula, President of Helsinki region and the chair of the Committee of Regions Working Group Green Deal Going Local. Rafał Trzaskowski, Mayor of Warsaw. And I will be very short because I will be giving the floor to Madam President. 3 housekeeping rules though. This is not Chatham House discussion. We have online viewers there, so welcome. Secondly, I will very soon will go for questions and answer session. So when you take a floor, express your name and your background. And thirdly, try to close the phones as it's the whole thing is recorded. So thank you so much. Thank you for the EPP group in the Committee of Regions, and thanks for you all coming. For a surprise, when we booked the place, we thought that this is a holiday week, so we took the smaller place. You are few and selected because we had to cut the registration, so you had the pleasure to be here with us. But without further ado, because we don't have so much time, Madam President, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, dear Tommy, dear guests, distinguished panelists. I'm very honored to welcome you to this joint co-organized by this event by Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies and the EPP Group in the European Committee of the Regions. And first, I would like to say a few words about the Committee of the Regions for those who don't know us yet. Well, we are a political assembly of 329 full and the same amount of alternate members. We are mayors, presidents and governors of regions, councillors in cities and villages, representing 1.2 million leaders in the subnational level across the European Union. Our group, the EPP group, which I'm the president of, is the biggest group. And we are the committee's driving force, thanks to leaders such as Kostas and Marko and Rafa. So, we very much hope that working together with Martens Center, we will manage to build and exchange expertise, but also point your attention to the EU topics, which actually matter to people. So, it's about people in their daily lives in our regions and cities. Being relevant to them means making relevant policy choices in Brussels, in the regions, and also at the national level. And I would say that this is the most important thing at the moment. We have to talk about democracy and the people. The topic of this event is the EU's climate targets, budgets, ambitions, and implementation on the ground is of particular importance of us, since we are in the middle of the COP30 negotiations. We have the climate targets and the draft MFF, the budget proposal, on the table. So we clearly see that what's happening around us it's with our climate. It's been one of the hottest years on record. Fires this summer burned 1% of the entire Iberian Peninsula. Floods devastated Valencia, Bavaria, or Lower Silesia. Torrential winds hit the Swedish regions of Dalarna or Sicily, to give you just a few examples. So, all this is becoming a new normal, which we, the local and regional leaders, have to deal with. And we need to predict the long-term consequences and make the right policy choices today. Because in the local and regional level, we implement 70% of the EU mitigation and 90% of the EU adaptation policies. However, we are not only the implementers, but also co-designers of the energy and climate transition, advocating for a local systemic transformation. A transformation that is ambitious, but also realistic. And we need also inclusive transformation, which takes on board the European, the national, regional, and local leaders, that takes in businesses, farmers, universities, and research centers. And we need a transition that includes all the citizens without leaving anyone behind, and that respects our global climate commitments. Otherwise, they end up in the fake world run by populists. And this is why I mentioned democracy already in the beginning. But this is also what the Martens Center have mentioned in recent publication on climate change. And this is realistic and inclusive view is exactly where the strength of center-right leaders and thinkers lies. For this transition to happen on the ground, we need, of course, the necessary funds. I'm the co-rapporteur of the MFF post-27. We, as a group, we support climate mainstreaming, but we also keep in mind the principle of proportionality and necessity. We demand the cut down of the administrative burden and the safeguarding our energy independence, providing affordable energy prices to households and SMEs. That is why we are in favor of a strong and modernized cohesion policy for 28 till 24, which continues to rest on what we define as the golden principles of cohesion policy. That is shared management, multi-level governance, partnership principle, and the place-based approach. We are convinced that the next MFF should and can make Europe more competitive, more secure, more resilient, and more sustainable without leaving any region, any city, any citizen behind. But we need that the regions are alone. We need, and the Europe needs, the regions to be alone, the regions and cities. That is why I'm grateful to the engagement of everyone today and to the Martens Center for hosting us and as the premises. So I look forward to an inspiring and honest exchange. Let's have a good meeting.
Thank you, Madam President. How would I proceed? I will have one kind of political question which I would throw to the panelists, but I hope that we will still not go too much on technicalities. As Madam President outlined, I think many conclusions can be already drawn since 2019 when the so-called Green Deal was launched. One could say that what we have found out in the first of all, that the whole economic transition is much more expensive than we thought. Secondly, there was this assumption that the private sector would jump in with the money and resources, but we do see that it's challenging. And thirdly, about citizens, what we noticed that people do care about climate change and they want to invest, but they are not ready to sacrifice their livelihood. And we see it very clearly in, for example, last European Parliament elections. The result of where the Greens lose the ground, though the climate change was and is a big topic. So my short question to you is that do we, and take into account the regional and communal level and how it's seen in the very ground, do we need some kind of adaptation there, looking at the goals that we have and certain political, technical realities? Very short answer, and then we go more in depth. So, Mr. Trzaskowski, floor is yours.
Well, yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I'll try to be telegraphic. I mean, first, the problem with this budget is that it's inflated, as always is, because it takes, unfortunately, unrealistic assumptions that we're going to have new taxes, which is going to be very difficult, if not impossible. So I'm very much afraid that the budget that we're going to end up, and that which our experience dictates to us, and I was both in the European Parliament and when one of the MFFs was negotiated, and then in the government, when the next one was negotiated, it is going to be at the end of the day much smaller than it is now. Secondly, unfortunately, the regions and the cities are taken out of the equation, which means that it will be very difficult to realize our common priorities, because you simply cannot do it without cities and regions, because we are the ones pushing the agenda forwards, and we are the ones responsible for actually the implementation of it, and we are the ones who really give the legitimacy to the whole exercise. So if you really want to take us out and centralize the budget, it will be very, very, very difficult to realize the priorities. Yeah. Thirdly, by putting cohesion, agriculture, and also aspects of internal security into one basket, and an inflated budget, which at the end of the day will be smaller, means that the cohesion policy will be much, much less ambitious than it is now, because it will be it might be cut into only helping the most disadvantaged regions and our farmers, which of course financially will also make it difficult to realize our common priorities when the cohesion policy will be slimmed down to an unprecedented degree. So all in all, I mean, you know, there are not that many reasons for enthusiasm and for optimism. One of the reasons for optimism is, of course, that at the end of the day we do have a proposal, and I know how difficult it is to arrive with one. But there is a big fight ahead of us for the governments and for the European Parliament, but also for us, the local and regional authorities, to try to make that budget more realistic, to include us in order to allow us to realize the common priorities, especially when it comes to climate change priorities, which needs to be different, because we need to focus on win-win solutions. We need to focus on what really people demand of us, which is, of course, also taking care of the energy prices, and less on restrictions. And we need to take into account, of course, the competitiveness of our economy. At the end of the day, who can do it better than local and regional authorities when we walk the streets of our cities and when we hear the demands of our citizens every other day? So this is a starting point. Let's hope that the structure of the budget will change, and of course the role of the local and regional authorities will be as it was before, and that the budget will not be centralized, because centralized budget means actually lowering the level of ambitions in reality.
Thank you very much. I guess we will in some minutes go more into details of the MFF and how do you. I'm very interested to hear how do you see it's going to play out. Mr. Pagoyannis, I have if you look the climate transition discussion in Europe, you find out that in many different regions you have very different dynamics. In maybe north you have clusters where the ecosystem is maybe more favorable in terms of investments. Greece, particularly, has certain benefits, like obviously the energy transition. So how do you see, because you are following the whole European debate, so do you see tensions and divisions there, and how then, if you think your city of Athens, how you see the perspectives in the city level, in the where they, as previous speaker mentioned, where the issues and the projects are really implemented?
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be with you this afternoon. And indeed, it is a pleasure and privilege to join this panel. So, as you rightly pointed out, when we talk about the economic transition and the green transition, we must recognize that Europe is not actually moving with a single speed. The effects of the transition are felt rather differently across the continent. But the divide, I would put it to you, is not between north and south or east and west. That is a gross oversimplification. It is actually a divide between well-connected and poorly connected energy systems. It's a divide between capital-rich and capital-constrained economies. It's a divide between industrial regions and regions that are, that's me putting it as diplomatically as possible, regions that are still reinventing their industrial base. However, this is not supposed to be our destiny, because after all, what unites us is that all Europeans face the same pressures: climate instability, energy security, or actually insecurity, competitiveness, and indeed, as Rafael mentioned earlier, household affordability. And it's absolutely clear that no country can face these challenges alone. And Greece, as you said, is actually a good case in point. It's a good illustration of both sides of the story. So on the one hand, we have this extraordinary success story, 46% reduction in CO2 emissions since 2005. Nearly half of our electricity now comes from renewables, from solar and wind. Now, these are some of the highest renewable shares in Europe. Now, of course, as you said, we're blessed with natural advantages. We have abundant sunlight, strong winds, and a geography that allow us to become a clean energy hub. However, on the other hand, Greece and Athens still faces some of the most volatile electricity prices in Europe, and also some of the highest electricity prices in Europe. And here lies the paradox, because we have household prices around 23 or 24 cents per kilowatt hour, and wholesale prices that can jump literally within a week from a few euros to over 300 euros per megawatt hour. So you see that essentially it's not that the renewables are failing, not at all, on the contrary, it's because the system around the renewables is incomplete. And that is why we have proposed, and our government has proposed, 5 golden rules for the transition that I think are common sense and matter deeply. And I would like to quickly go through them, because I feel and I sense that most of you will agree. Number 1, we need cost-effective deployment, which means that, of course, we need to scale what is competitive, like, for example, solar, which you mentioned, and we need to do that before pushing other technologies. Number 2, we can all agree that the time has come for technological neutrality. The goal is emissions reductions and not ideology. Number 3, we need a truly integrated European market. We still behave in Europe at this time of day as if we have borders. Old grids, limited interconnections, and incredible regulatory barriers, which actually prevent cheap renewable power to flow from the south to the north. Fourth, we need stronger market governance. The obvious: predictable rules, transparent pricing, and invest in signals that reduce volatility. And fifth, the transition must actually support prosperity. It's not an end to itself. It must strengthen industry, jobs, and social cohesion. And I would like to close by arguing that the example of Athens makes this rather concrete. Right now in Athens, I'm sorry to say, we don't have yet thousands of rooftop solar installations, for example, or a citywide smart grid. We do not have innovation clusters or battery systems that some northern cities do have, but we can have that. Athens does have the scale, we have the climate, we have the density, we have the academic ecosystem, and we do have the urgency to become a laboratory of European resilience, a city that actually effectively uses clean energy to lower costs, strengthen competitiveness, and improve daily life. So the point here is that Athens can get there, and can get there quickly, as long as Europe empowers its cities, removes internal barriers, and invests in interconnections, and of course, to close where Raphael began, to treat local governments as partners and not as an afterthought, to treat local government as allies and not as foes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pakoyannis. Next, I would like to go to Markku Markkula. It's from what Mr. Pakoyannis said about stakeholders. So what especially in Committee of Regions, we have discussed a lot about systemic transformation and societal innovation, the whole process, and you have followed and studied that in detail. So what's the state of it? What's the next step? What are the dynamics and what has worked and what has not worked?
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. And I think that with the panelists, we are a very good team with the same EPP background, but very committed on this European commitment to tackle these burning challenges. And as Kostas Pakoyannis already said, so that every experienced city or village brings some added value to this, let's say, this European transformation. And everyone is agreeing that we need more this systematic transformation, because now we are more on the situation where we have thousands or even millions of projects around in Europe. We don't really use much of the results of those projects. We don't. The European Commission does not put enough attention how to get the benefit of the results, how to apply that to real life practice. And myself coming from the north, so situation naturally on climate is a bit different when we have winter, frozen lakes, frozen roads, frozen ground. So we need to have the energy system in a good condition. It's built through the decades by the taxpayers' money. So, but we have very good, close to everywhere in Finland, all towns and cities, we have a district heating system. And in our case, in my case, in Espoo, fastest growing city in Finland, we have for the last 50 years been growing so fast that close to 5,000 people average new inhabitants per year. So we need to have the urban planning in good condition, how to extend this district heating system. What does that mean? What does that mean for electricity? Now we are facing an enormous challenge. What does electrification of society, whole society, mean in practice? Because we need to get rid of carbon. We've done that practically in my city already on the energy system. We started several years before really that UN agreed on the SDGs. Now having the symbol, I see a few of us are still the SDG symbol with us. So bearing that came so that we needed to be more committed on doing many of these things together, learning and motivating people, researchers, young students to find new solutions, and especially find new solutions by industry. And now we are on that stage so that in my city we started this, what we call the Clean Heat Espoo, together with industry. We don't anymore own the heating grid. We don't own as a city, we don't own the heat production power stations and so on. So it's private, but it's connected with the city, agreed with the city, and with this we even already 2 years ago we got rid of using coal at all when Mr. illegal Putin attacked Ukraine. We immediately stopped using the fossil fuels from Russia, hitting heavily on our economy. But we made that in even a couple of weeks' time, so that practically now close to everywhere in the energy system we are carbon free. Not only in one city or the other city, but throughout close to the whole country. And now we need to put more attention to traffic, heavy traffic especially. It's easier for normal private cars to change to electric cars, but for the heavy traffic, that's much more challenging. So this makes it that we can share a lot of this experience, how we have done, and help the others throughout Europe to make this. But it needs to go more systemically. And I have 5 key points, saying very short, so that cities with their industry, as a community with industry. So we are the engines for Europe's green transformation. It needs to be a transformation because there's so much new. Second is so that EU must accelerate the measures for this systematic climate transformation. That needs now to be in line with the Clean Industrial Deal, with the competitiveness compass, with the security policy, and all parts of that. So that's part of our, let's say, EPP manifesto, that these are all integrated strongly. Then the third point is so that we have already the European Union missions, climate neutral cities by 2030. 100 cities are agreed, made their city contracts with their industry, with academia, and received the mission label that they are going fast Most of them will be able to get the 2030 climate neutrality goal, some a bit slower, but anyhow, good experiences. We need to use these and the vision on soil, mission on waters, and so on. So we share a lot on that. So fourth point is so that digital, especially artificial intelligence or quantum, that's not a side activity. It's really integrated and needs to be more integrated. And with that we can really manage these grids and the whole concept, get that faster applied. But it needs investments, and that's my fifth point. So that when we think about, we need industrial investments everywhere. It cannot be by taxpayers' money only. This huge transformation, and these industrial investments, we have a lot of experience that predictability is the key for them. So I would not go at all to changing some minor adjustments on the regulation issues, but keep them stable as they are, to target 2030, 2040, 2050, so that the investments can be made. It's not the question that much from most of the companies, private sector, doing the investments about the subsidies, but it's more really predictability that they need, and they can strongly believe that the market mechanism functions. And that is something that from the EPP side we need to look more. And so how to get the market mechanism, so the trading, emission trading systems and so on, now to be in a few years' time dealing with traffic as well, how we can get more out of that. And that's where we need new knowledge, and that comes from the minds of this EPP kind of people who are committed on private market system to make this transformation a positive reality for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Markkula. So I will already open. We have 1 hour, so it's a long good time. So I will open the floor for questions. I will give to Dimitar Lirkov the question, but before that, I will make my. I'm trying to put the discussion a little bit more on political level, because I would claim that the discussion now in Brussels or even in Europe is, we started with the narrative that climate, tackling climate change, technological transition will enhance our competitiveness. That was our starting point in 2019. Now I would claim that narrative has greatly suffered. Actually, in Brussels, in many corners, the feeling is that there's a contradiction, and there is also, as a consequence, kind of push to, that we need more so-called realistic approach on that. And in many parts, the business is pushing back, especially as Mr. Markkula mentioned the targets. So how do you see this debate? How because you are following this issue in the regional and city level, is the European climate transition project creating competitiveness or not? What are the lessons learned from the last years? I don't know who would like to take the floor on that.
Well, I mean, that would require probably an hour.
Well, you're a politician. You can do it in a couple of minutes.
I'll do my best. No, politicians can't do it in a couple of minutes.
Okay. Good.
Researchers can do it in a couple of minutes. First of all, I think that we need to be very, very much focused. This is the most important thing. And as I've said, more focused on win-win solutions than on restrictions. And again, that's why local and regional authorities are so incredibly important, because the European Union was too much focused on language which unfortunately was seen as ideological, and too much focused on big stories about saving the planet, which I agree with, but less on what kind of benefits do the consumers can get out of that. And we can translate that into simply, because I mean, it's very hard to be against greening the city or having better health because of better air quality, or saving energy because it has an impact on prices, or having a modern public transportation which does not pollute the city. And I could go on and on and on. Also urban planning, which takes into account all of those priorities and makes our life much more bearable, because we are not going to heat our heads in the middle of summer. all of that is just a necessity of a different language. Then, of course, there's a question of money, and people need to understand that we are best at spending money, and we know how to do it, and also that when we look at the budget of the European Union, even if you're against all of those policies, I mean, for cities such as Athens or Helsinki or Warsaw, it will simply be impossible to get money from the European budget if you are not about competitiveness and if you're not about saving energy and realizing our common priorities. And finally, guys, I mean, especially in our part of Europe, everyone is talking about security. Security. This has huge security ramifications. And I'm not only talking about Putin. I'm talking about the world which is completely unpredictable. If we want to be secure, we need to be self-reliant. We need to be self-sufficient. We need to be predictable. And in order to achieve all of those objectives, we simply need to invest in all of those capacities that we have been, for example, modernize our grid or put those solar panels on all the public utilities, which we do actually in Warsaw, because this just simply makes sense, common sense. There's nothing to do with ideology or realizing any kind of priorities. And this is crucial that we start explaining to the people that that's exactly what we mean. And last but not least, that it has to be tied in, as the European Commission now plans, with the competitiveness of our economy. That we have moved most of our industrial production out of Europe. Our agriculture is under attack, and so on and so forth. We need to also prove that by taking all of those measures, we're also aiming at decreasing costs of energy and making ourselves more competitive. If you talk to farmers, seriously, these guys know better how to do stuff than functionaries in Brussels. Last thing I'm just going to tell you. I was in the middle of the presidential campaign where everything I did hitherto in Brussels, everything was used against me. Constitutional affairs, environment policy, immigration that Europeans were doing, our trade deals, everything was used against me. Also the fact that I spoke French. Seriously, which shows you how sad some national debates are. And I went to see the farmers, and one of those farmers just clicked on a screen, and he told me, those guys in Brussels will tell me what to do. I mean, look at this. He put a few drones up, infrared, and he goes, look at this. Am I crazy? Am I going to put pesticides on my field everywhere? Of course not. But look, infrared. I need a little bit of pesticide here. I need a little bit of pesticide here and there. It's 2%, but it has to be concentrated because then it will not spread. And the current rules of the European Community does not allow me to do that. And then they send some functionary who have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, and they're in the 19th century when it comes to technology. Polish farmer, east of Poland, okay? Quite big farmer, of course. So that's the thing. We need to trust the people, go with them, and convince them that this is win-win. Otherwise, we're not going to win the debate. And another thing, don't use the jargon, please. I mean, if we are going to use the jargon, sustainability, forget it. It just doesn't work. Translate it to health, air, clean air, saving energy, increasing self-sufficiency, security, and then maybe we can win the debate. But of course, the structure of the budget and our role would have to be changed, because at the end of the day, we know the language that needs to be spoken better than anyone else.
Debate later. Madam President.
Yeah, I agree, of course, everything what Rafael said. I just want to underline I am using the jargon now. The multi-level governance. The multi-level governance. You gave a great example why it's so important, because here in the Brussels level, we should decide only the things that are needed to be decided together. And then everything else, the local level and the regional level. And that's why that is the only way to make it happen. The predictability was mentioned. And I think this is also something we are not paying too much enough attention to. And also the timeline. We talk about 2050, what is happening then. But then we have other things that we talk only like what's happening now. We are reacting. and we should have the clear and coherent vision. What is the Europe we are building? Because people want also the hope. They want something that they can rely on. So I think because all these things are connected to, and this is something we definitely have to pay more attention to. This is what I wanted to say about the timeline and the predictability. I think that is really important, and also, of course, speak with the language that people understand.
And the organize. Dimitar, you had the floor.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much, Tommy. Two questions for two separate speakers. Madam President, in your opening speech, you mentioned the word realistic a couple of times, so I'll be very happy to hear in which direction you mean, maybe simplification or maybe on financing. I'll just be curious to hear more on this. And Mayor Trzaskowski, I fully agree when it comes to the responsibility of the local regional communities. I mean, you are feeling the burn, so to say, when it comes to climate. My father has been in local politics for most of his life, so it's the deepest respects and sympathies for these administrations. So here comes a nasty question for a person dealing with local politics. Given that this world is going to not in the best case scenario of 1.5 degrees Celsius, right? Maybe we're going to a 2 degrees Celsius scenario. 80-something% of the global energy usage is still fossil fuels. So do you think in this decade there's going to be some very hard realizations for local administrations that even though Europe pushes money and effort in this, we're still 7% of the global emissions. The rest of the world isn't doing that much. Is this decade when we realize that it's going to be about climate adaptation of the cities and the regions, not mitigation, given the harsh realities we have on climate? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I must say that the word realistic is, it's used in various ways. Yeah, and I want to thank you for asking about that. For me, the realistic means that there's also, you have to think about the timeline as well, and also what is the option, because every now and then, especially populists are using it's like it's not realistic, we're not going to go there, and blah blah blah. But I think quite many of us agree on that we have to look the next steps. If we want to be progressive, as Rafa was mentioning in his opening speech about the changes that are done in the cities, or if we think about the automotive sector, when we look at China, what they are doing, they are investing into the next things. If we are investing only on the system, what is happening now, we are going to be always only answering what is happening. We have to be, for me, the realistic budget is that we need to have the money to invest into the new ways, and not to put money to the old system that is going to die anyway. We in Finland, we have been good in some things, what Markku was mentioning about, but then we are rather dumb what we are doing for some things. And I think that is happening all around Europe. So to invest into the future, not to the past. That is what realistic means to me.
Okay, just go. The challenging question.
Well, since we were with French, I always start my day in Brussels in one of the best Brussels bookstores. This is a book written by one of the fonctionnaires from the European Commission responsible for energy for 30 years. And I mean, even he's not a climate denier. He makes this argument that we forgot about competitiveness and that the whole world is doing nothing and that we are killing our economy, okay? I disagree with such strongly worded thesis, but this is not a climate denier. This is someone who spent 30 years in the European Commission. Now, it is a very difficult, because, I've been having this debate with many different people. This is a very difficult argument to take on when people are saying, why are we doing so much, killing our competitiveness and so on, when the rest of the world is doing nothing? And of course, our response is that we are setting a certain standards and that many people are following that standard, not only when it comes to climate, but on any kind of issues. We set standards on trade. Everyone wants to trade with us, so then follow our standards. But I mean, that's not enough. So that's why I said that we are best, and that's why we have so many different networks when we benchmark and so on, at showing that there are such solutions which are not controversial, that actually push the agenda forwards. Most of them, you're right, are adaptation.
And we should focus on them because why? Because first of all, we are doing it anyhow. People, even climate deniers, like green streets, most of them at least, or parks, and when they can hide when there is 40 degrees Celsius, I mean, it is a bit easier to convince them, right? So in that sense, adaptation is easier, and it has to be done anyhow. Does that mean that we should forget about mitigation? No, I think that there are certain things that we should be doing in order to push the agenda forwards. And Bolsonaro looked invincible, and he folded. Whether he's going to be back, we never know. The problem with many of our countries, Poland is included, even though I'm an optimist, is that it's very difficult to predict the political scenario. But we should do as much as we can. And even some populists were forced into doing some adaptation measures because they knew that sooner or later people will attack them. I mean, floods, droughts, and so on and so forth. I mean, those are the daily occurrences that people see, and it's easier to explain it to them that we should do something about that. How ambitious we should be? Again, this is just a question of restrictions. And I think that, there is this huge debate about ETS2, right? ETS2 will kill Polish economy. And even though my background and my positions, it's untenable for me to defend ETS2. I think we are doing too much too quickly, and we need to. I mean, it's I'm finishing, but politics is always a balancing act. How much freedom, how many rules, right? Here, it's exactly the same. It's a balancing act in which how much we can really do, and we need to be ambitious, especially on climate adaptation. But security, competition, and so on. I mean, those are the daily problems that we need to resolve. I mean, we need to acknowledge the fact that people think that it was like this, even if it was like this. People think it was like this, so we need to balance it out more, and especially, as I've said at the beginning, change the narrative. Because without that, people were seeing us as like chasing those crazy priorities and those crazy, thresholds that we've set for ourselves for ideological reasons. One example, and I'm ending. I was first in Poland to introduce the LGBT Charter to protect the rights of the minorities. I made a huge mistake because I called it LGBT Charter. No one understood what it was. And the populists ran away with it and said that this is an ideological import from the West and so on. Had I named it Equality Charter, preventing the rights of gays and lesbians, 10% of the Polish people more would have agreed with it. So this is just a question of language, and people need to understand what is it all about. If you talk to people and say, like, do you have anything against minorities? I mean, shouldn't they have the same rights? And they say yes. But they say this LGBT. I mean, this is the Westerners telling us how to live. This is just a pivotal language which actually can change the tone of the debate. We need to do exactly the same when it comes to our priorities in fighting global warming.
Thank you so much. Many excellent points. But I would finish the round with the panel. We have one question there, but I will take it. I will still stick to this issue. The economic transition versus competitiveness. I would go. Because I think that's really the core of the whole political debate. So, Mr. Pakoyannis, what do you think?
Well, okay. Let me make the political case. Let me make it in 2 points. Number one. Today, democracy is afraid of democracy. We follow every election that's happening in Europe with repetition. Life stops. And it happens why? Because extremists, radicals, populists seem so rich, so close to real power, right? I mean, look at what happened in the Netherlands. Look at the Czech Republic, where there's actually like this party called, apparently, Motorists for Themselves, who are about to become kingmakers. Now, motorists from themselves are, make no mistakes, they are against cyclists, but they're also against NATO. They're for cars, but they're also for Russia. So, and of course we cannot ignore what's happening in Germany and France. Right now, the AfD and the National Front are actually ahead in all opinion polls. So this is a climate of disillusionment, of cynicism, of exhaustion. And what makes no sense is that rather than actually trying to include and build safety valves between the state and society, who, by the way, we all know what the base safety valves are, local government, the closest democratic institutions to the citizen, we do exactly the opposite. We centralize more and more, both within our national context and in Brussels. And by the way, local government is where there is so much political capital exists. Rich political capital and strong political capital. And by the way, local government is where, whether it's center left or center right, actually practical mayors are elected. Local government is about the middle crowd. It's about problem solvers. It's about pragmatists. It's not about extremists and radicals. So my first point is that we need to actually give local government a seat on a table. My second point is, because I've had enough of the hypocrisy, right? Let's speak bluntly and let's say things as they are. The way we're going, the Americans and the Chinese will eat us alive. We all know that, but we just don't want to admit it. However, we do have a wake-up call. And what is a wake-up call? We have the Draghi report, which is not a political wish list. It's actually a structural X-ray of the European economy. So we know, for example, that the IMF estimates that intra-EU trade costs amount to an equivalent 45% tariff on goods and 110% tariffs on services. We know that, yes, we do suffer from external pressures, but it's also about internal fragmentation. We know that a law needs 19 months in Europe to be passed. We know that our trade within the EU is actually half of what it should be. And we also know that we need money that we're just not willing to invest. So as a result, we come up with this false choice, an artificial dilemma. And we are asking our citizens, from Poland and Finland to Greece, to actually choose between safety and security, or the environment, or competitiveness. And then we wonder why they actually don't vote for us. And then we pretend that we're incredibly surprised because they actually opt to vote for populists and radicals. Because ours is the politics of weakness. Ours is the politics of surrender. We actually lay the right carpet for the populists. And they just come and walk. They just come and walk on it. Last thing, we did this mistake in Greece back in 2014, 2015. We were weak. We weren't brave in supporting and defending our positions. And we saw the result. We were the canary in the coal mine, where the radicals and populists had their first go. And they almost brought our country to the brink. So we know what we can do, what we have done wrong, but we also know what we can do right.
Thank you, Mr. Pakoyannis. Markku Markkula, what do you think,
That's my quick reaction is so that because the situation in all parts of Europe is not at all the same. And we need new knowledge. We need these new solutions which solve the local challenges, solutions that are seen positive by the local people. So we should actually more rely on the local judgment and local understanding what the mayors or city council can do, because they know what are the burning issues there at the moment. So where to put the money, or at least part of that, not to try to guide everything from Brussels. And this is very hard to change the, let's say, the image, even though that in many cases Commission is doing positive things, but the people, as we've already heard, so they don't feel that way. So we should actually encourage now, especially now on these systematic climate transformation issues, encourage some of the cities with their industry, with their academia, to do some, create some new innovative solutions, test them, and kind of then make them ready through the experimentations to scale to the others as well. It's a wise use of money, and it's not the whole EU money. But it's something part that we need to do. And when we have talked for 20 years now about that cohesion, originally actually 20 years, 30 years ago, it was really to bring the lowest income areas a bit closer to the leaders. So it's not anymore cohesion, it's not anymore the same. It's about the democracy that the local people know, and every region in Europe needs to have some of these regional development funds, because that's for the benefit of everyone. And now today, with the digitalized world and flow of information, flow of knowledge, we can accelerate our own activities much more. How we learn from that solution, how we learn from that, and how we apply that knowledge in our local situation. That's what I would do then next, and that's why we have this regional policy, regional innovations. That's why we Committee of the Regions now, where Pakoyannis is as well a member in this Green Deal Going Local. Rafael was the chair of that previous term. We have built, we know what should be done, so we are ready to move on.
Thank you. Sorry, I will have you use this one already waiting. So.
Thank you very much. Jarosław Pietras, Wilfred Martens Center. I have been observing the climate debates and decision making over the last decades, not a decade, but much more. And always I have seen a very much common approach to a long-term target. Everyone would agree. And also ministers were very clear what they could do next year, having a budget and instruments. It was much less precise when it happens what will be done in between. Because then what you have is something which is a mixture of promises and real things. But very often it is a mixture which is a bit foggy. And then there is a striking difference. At the beginning, we have started with a market-based instrument, putting ETS, which simply means that those who pollute, who emit CO2, has to pay. And then the conviction was this would make the things moving. It is moving, however, the speed was not sufficient. Therefore, what we have invented is a very prescriptive policy to say you will not bulb or decandescent bulb because they use too much energy. You will not big vacuum cleaners because they use too much energy. You will not internal combustion engines because it's politic, and so on. So you've got an intervention with a detail saying to people what they should do by regulation. So you put it in regulation. And this is alienating people because they are being told from outside the views they have and the actions that they could take are not internalized. They are forced from outside. So it's alienating. So I'm looking for the instruments of delivery. And I would say from this discussion, I haven't seen too many of these instruments of delivery, except for saying we have to give more things, more competence to regions. Maybe we have to go put more money. But from where this money? If you will take money to the EU budget, then you will have it less somewhere else. It is about making choices. It is about trade-offs. There are difficult choices here to be made. And then when you have make a difficult choice, let's take a steel. Suddenly it has appeared that Europe has got a problem with the steel and therefore has taken a very harsh measures to import steel, to limit importation of steel because the production of steel has been collapsing in Europe. So it is a choice what you have to do. And you've got a choice between competitiveness, between environment, and between, for example, autonomy. If you want, the problem is that we very often, when we speak, we want to have all good things at the same time. Realistic, big money. We want to have a better policies. We have more competences. But I do not see in this process a clear instrument of delivery of what we want.
Basically, show me the money. Okay, Mr. Pakoyannis, and then you have you. Okay, All right. Okay. So we have already four in line. Mr. Katajanis.
I come from a country that has gone bankrupt. So I have a lot of respect for the fiscal discipline argument. Having said so, I think most economists right now agree that Europe is in a strong financial position that would allow the Union to actually grow its debt and use financial instruments and actually move forward with European bonds. We have done so successfully already once during the pandemic. I think we can do it again. Let me put it a bit more aggressively, if I may. If we want to compete with China and the US, this is a one-way street. We don't have another option because they're doing that. They're doing that as we speak. I'm not saying we should, go crazy. However, taking it out of the discussion is suicidal.
Mr. Trzaskowski?
Well, first of all, I have to admit I have a certain stage fright because Jarosław Pietras was my first economy teacher at the university. But I'll try to respond because I think that this is one of the mistakes that sometimes we're making. When I put a proposal to give a little bit of money directly to the cities, it's not that I want new money to appear on the table. I think that if the European Commission were to actually come up with a program where 5-10% of all the money for climate adaptation would go directly to cities and regions, what we would achieve, first of all, that's the best instrument to fight populists, because whatever happens, we're rule of law and so on and so forth, regions and cities still get the money. Now, how it works in Warsaw. The money that we were using from the European Union, but also even the money, small programs that we won from Bloomberg Foundation, we use them for pilot projects. And then we could see that if the pilot projects work, then it's not that difficult to get, there's quite a lot of capital that we can get, loans and so on and so forth. And then if something works, we can actually decide much more speedily to use the money which is available. Like, for example, when we have adopted our plan to go to net neutrality in Warsaw to 2050, we decided to start with 2 districts of Warsaw. And that allows us to check, what works, what doesn't. Also, where you can carry the people with you. And that's why I think that giving money directly to the cities and definitely not taking us out of the equation when it comes to distributing EU money makes perfect sense. Not that I just simply mean that we should get additional billions for cities. And now, exactly, then we can start translating it into concrete examples. We've done the for example, we've eliminated 90% of coal power stoves in Warsaw. We have exact numbers when it comes to asthma patients. We have, for example, one district, I always give this example, one district of Warsaw, which is most underprivileged. We had the lowest educational scores in Praga. People thought that it's because, it's a difficult district, people with problems live there and so on and so forth. It was underfinanced and so on and so forth. It turns out that after eliminating coal power stoves and actually networking those people to central heating, the educational scores are slowly going up. Why? Because those kids were simply cold. And they were catching cold, they were missing school, and so on and so forth. This is a perfect example where you can show this is not some ideological crazy idea. This is something that really improves life. Similarly, when it comes to less congestion in the city, similarly when it comes to, that greening lowers the temperature and so on and so forth. That's why I'm an advocate for the local and regional authorities, because we can actually show it on the ground. It is much more difficult for countries, and they're not that willing to do so, to demonstrate the palpable effects of our actions. So all in all, I think that we are just better at translating our common goals into win-win solutions for the people. I think that we are better at testing concrete solutions and benchmarking with other cities to see what works, what doesn't. And that's why involving us in the decision-making, programming, that's why allowing us to go with some pilot projects makes sense for the whole of the European Union. And especially if you add on to it the democratic argument, the populist, the rule of law, and so on and so forth. my argument was also, I was always accused by then opposition, the Populist Party, that I'm going to Brussels to tell my friends in Brussels to cut the funding. I never did that. My argument was the opposite. My argument was, why should I suffer and the inhabitants of Warsaw, suffer from some crazy government decisions? Give us money directly. We will use it. So that's exactly what the argument stands for. And I think that at the end of the day, also there is a certain credibility that local leaders carry with them. Okay, maybe not in my case because I'm also a national figure, which of course taints me forever. But those smaller local leaders hold that legitimacy, and then they really can deliver on the ground, and people can, they're much more accountable at the end of the day.
Thank you. We have Madam President, and then you, and then Garvan. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. I would add after this what Kostas and Rafa said, also the performance-based planning and funding, because this is the way to give the space for the local and regional ways to organize it the best way, and to get all the resources that there are, and find out what is the best way to act just in that region. So performance-based budgeting, planning, and also regulations. Not to decide everything, with 900 different measures directly from here, but to decide what we want to achieve, and then leave the table open for the regions to decide together with the different stakeholders.
Right, great. We still have kind of 20 minutes left. We have two questions already lined, but we can take still a couple. So, Madam, then Carmen, and then there. Okay.
Hi, I am Angela Kedaitani. I worked for Commission, then I worked 3 years for Lithuanian government. I am Lithuanian. I am now back to Brussels. I just want to comment on this, implementation of Green Deal in the national states. I can praise my country. When I worked for 2-3 years, we have an environmental agency. We have good statistics, perfect statistics on renovation, and by doing a lot of renovation, we have cities which are 100% renovated buildings, because for other countries like for Poland, very important building renovation because of cold weather. Then changing heating kettles. We do not heat on coal, but still we heat on gas, but we still have newer modification with less emissions. So this system is very many calls from Climate Fund, our National Climate Fund, also subsidies to buy electrical vehicles. As it relates, for example, to my local municipality in North Lithuania, New Akmenė, it's been a very outdated region, but now it's, for example, it's a lot of green innovation. It's changing day by day. When I come back to Lithuania, I go to my mayor Mitrofanovas. He is originally Russian, been born in Lithuania, and very pro-independence person. And it's a lot of action. He plans to launch sustainability hub, for example, in his municipality. We are now preparing documents for construction industry, because we have cement industry and wooden industry in North Lithuania, and they are not polluting at all. We have better air standards in our, let's say, very difficult industry region, cement, etc., Akmenės cementas, than, for example, in Vilnius. We have day-to-day measurements of air quality. So in this respect, I would tell that we are doing a lot, and we are progressing a lot, and our economy growing along with this. But as it relates to a Green Deal going local, so for me it's interesting. I've been to some conference in spring here in Brussels, which been telling about local green deals. So for me it's interesting. Do you have some statistics how many local green deals are in Europe?
Okay, yeah. So we take Garvan, then we can go back to panel.
Yeah, Garvan Walsh, the Martin Centre. Two quick questions. One for Mr. Trzaskowski. You said that the ETS2 would kill the Polish economic recovery. Could you explain a bit more why it would do that, and suggest what we might want to change about it? And then to Mr. Bakoyannis, you know, Greece has gone through an incredible economic recovery over the past 15 years. I've been there every summer for the last 5 or 6 years, and it's always been tremendous to see the progress you're making. Also, tremendous progress in installing renewables. Obviously, you have advantages there. I wonder whether this question of competitiveness is then seen differently in different parts of Europe. There were places in Northern Europe that used to have the advantages of being near coal supplies or had the apparent advantage of being able to import cheap Russian gas, are now suffering from economic dislocation as a result. Now, as you know, as we have this huge surge in solar production, for example, possibly a glut in solar production next year, I want to ask you, what's your advice for the Germans in how they should address their economic headwinds?
All right, good. Okay, so let's go. Trzaskowski at ETS at 2, and then we take the later. Okay.
Well, I mean, first of all, because it kind of ties in with the question about the Germans. I mean, the greatest tragedy of some of the European Union politics was this incredible hypocrisy that some of our friends were engaging in. Because on the one hand, we wanted, to make ourselves independent and green. On the other hand, some of the countries in the European Union making themselves totally dependent on cheap fossil fuels from Russia. I mean, come on. And how are you going to defend that position? And I'm not going to come back to the questions of Nord Stream 2 and so on and so forth. And the terrible thing is, the good thing is that when I hear Chancellor Merz, he agrees that mistakes have been made. When I read Angela Merkel's memoirs, she says that everything was peachy, wonderful, no mistakes were being made. And now the question is, what does that mean for the future if the war ends, hopefully as soon as possible? I mean, is there going to be some politicians in Europe who will try to go to business as usual with some of our foes? Now, I think that we need to have less restrictions, as I said, and ETS2 is more restrictions, not less restrictions. And on such areas that are incredibly sensitive to some countries, Poland included, like transport. And if you want to increase restrictions in agriculture and so on, this is exactly something that we shouldn't do. I mean, if we're serious about our competitiveness. I mean, I'm just going to give you one example. We talk about security. We spend billions and billions and billions and billions. And are we serious about building ammunition factories? Because we have ammunitions in Europe for 3 days of fighting. The only country which is prepared is Finland. And that's it. Okay? Are we serious about, bringing back some industrial potential when it comes to defense? That means that we need to have our steelworks back. And if we are to have our steelworks back in Europe, we need to do something with the ETS system. I mean, those are the choices that we need to make. And as I told you, this is a balancing act. And since, the balances were tipped, I mean, ETS2 will just add to that imbalance instead of balancing the situation back to where it was. And the fact is that if we need to also take the perspectives of other countries into the equation. And if we haven't learned anything from what happened in Russia, that means we haven't learned anything. Because if one country or 5 or 6 tell you that this is a wrong direction, the whole of the European Union should listen. I remember we started doing energy independence things in the European Parliament 2004, 5, 6, 7, 9, having the first report in the European Parliament, and all of my German friends were telling me that I was crazy, that we were Russian obsessed, that we didn't understand what was happening in Europe, and that actually we can do business with Putin because he's a very reliable partner. And I could go on and I could tell you hundreds of stories where we were seen as crazy, and his history proved us right. So are we learning a lesson or not? I mean, if 1 or 2 countries which have gone through populism, which have gone through all of those experiences which actually proved that we were right, is telling our friends that ETS2 is too fast and it's too restrictive, and it has nothing to do with promoting our competitiveness and our defense and our security, I think that argument has to be heard. And again, I'm not saying let's throw all of our policies through the window. I'm just saying adapt and think about the pace that we want to adopt. If we are not doing that, we're just selling ourselves short to the populace, because it means that we do not hear the arguments which are made on the streets. And I think that would simply be suicidal. You won't find many people more susceptible to fighting global warming in my part of Europe than myself. Telling you that.
Mr. Bagoyanis, the impression of the competitiveness, or how is that seen, and then the advice to Germans.
Okay. So as I was walking this afternoon to come to this event, I was speaking with a friend of mine in DC. And we had a very interesting conversation. He was explaining to me very analytically what the US administration is doing right now. Because, we may be seeing Donald Trump on TV, but there is a policy, right? There is a strategy. So they're buying equity in companies that make chips. They are buying equity in companies that are involved in critical minerals and rare earths. And they're also buying equity in drones and anything that has to do with new technology. And, it's very tempting for us to say, it's not the Department of Defense any longer, it's the Department of War, and that says everything about them. But that's a gross oversimplification. Things are much more complicated. This is the brave new world, and we need to wake up to it. Many of us pretend that the world may be changing, but Europe doesn't need to change. And we don't understand that what we are essentially doing is making a very conscious choice to turn Europe into a luxurious all people's home. Now, my dream, my aspiration for my children is not for them to live in an all people's home or to live just in a tourist destination. We love our beaches. We have amazing sun. We're very happy that you're coming every summer. Please, all of you come and visit. But that's not our ambition. Which is why we are insisting on three things. Number one, single market, a complete single market. It is ridiculous that we're still having this discussion in the year 2025. I fully understand that there are national interests. I fully respect that. However, we are at the point of lose-lose when we could be at the point of win-win. Number two, I will insist on investment in the scale of Draghi demands. Yeah. We have to be very clear about that. We cannot be happy with our budget. And we cannot pretend to be happy with our budget, because we aren't. Number three, again, I will come back to that because I think it's very important for protecting democracy. This is not us, the four of us, being self-serving. Local government is not an afterthought, it's a pillar. So let me give you an example. Right now in Greece, there is the region of Western Macedonia. They're undergoing an incredible transformation. That is where all coal mines and coal factories were concentrated. Not all, I mean, most of them. Which means, obviously, that the economy of the region, to put it in Brussels talk, the ecosystem, was all built around these coal factories and coal mines. Our government, very bravely, decided to close this because we want to de-coal our economy. Now, it's like, to put it in different terms, going to Crete. Have you been to Crete?
No, not yet.
Okay. Tell me an island you've been to.
Syros.
Syros. It's like going to the island of Syros and telling them there's not going to be tourism anymore. That is the effect, that is the impact of the change. It is happening, however, with good policy, with a strong regional presence, with European funds that are being leveraged, with private funds, and now we're actually talking about data centers and renewables. I'm not saying that this has been painless. It's been difficult. However, it is a success story about how things can be done bottom up.
Great. We had a question there, please. Sorry, Marco. Okay, sorry.
Just very quickly,
reacting on this competitiveness issues, because typically it's too much seeing that my next door neighbor is my competitive because we both want to do this, or we are producing the same kind of cows or milks and so on, so how to compete. But what Costa said, so that it's really that it's already time to wake up and see that this is a single market. We need to look Europe as a whole, and on certain things we should do more together, because it's not at all wise that in every city, village, university we do exactly the same as the others. We need to see what is China doing, what is the US doing. Actually, Trump is opening us a lot more opportunities now to do. We could compete with them because he's throwing out the best brains from universities and so on. So it's time that we invest and read more carefully what is included in the Draghi report. Certain things should be definitely done together with the joint money, and not to look that, okay, is EU budget increasing a bit? We will have actually with Sari and the others next week a meeting with the Parliament of Finland to convince certain things for them to give a guidance to our government, so that what Finland should be doing on this. Certain things should be done together openly in Europe, so we get much added value for everyone.
Okay, final question.
Thank you. My name is Goar Sarksan. I'm coming from industry business, and I'd like to ask some questions about money. I'm not a politician, but I've been part of the European ecosystem in a sense that there were multiple industrial programs that I was also invited to help in evaluation and those kind of initiatives at the European level. What I've seen over this more than 15 years, there were brilliant programs with excellent experts, not only from industry, but also scientists. And what happened at the results of those programs, most of them ended up in the shelf. Nothing happened from the perspective of industrialization, breakthroughs, and things like that. There were a couple of breakthroughs, but most of them left European Union. So, and the pace of European Union, in a sense, to accelerate these breakthroughs is extremely slow. I know that there is attempt to speed up, but what are those actions that you are the local champions, you are the local power in your regions, of course. What are your practical actions to accelerate this speed so that the cost is becoming less? On the one hand, we say there is no money, but if you look closely, there is money, but it is just spent on a different way. For example, the delay costs us a lot. So anything which is delayed, anything which is postponed, that costs us much more than if it will be directed to the right objective. Sorry, your name. You were perfectly mentioning about the my colleague here sitting next to me. He was perfectly mentioning also about the same thing. Sorry, the name. Yeah, in a sense that what is changed. He's watching this over the years, but of course from a different perspective. From my perspective, from looking into the business, delay costs a lot for the industry, but not only for industry, but also about the citizens, for the governments, for academia, and what are you doing in order to accelerate this so that there is less investment on unnecessary activities? Thank you.
Yeah, actually, thank you very much for question, because that was more or less my closing question, except much more sophisticated. So let's go to the kind of closing. I look in the program. Let's go in the reverse order, finishing with Madam President. So on that question, or if there's something else you want to add, about the communication to citizens, but especially this kind of how to accelerate and also that. So, Mr. Trzaskowski, floor is yours.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that we in the cities, we do not invest in programs or in investments which does not pay off. That is the difference between us and some of the projects that were proposed by by the countries. Why? Because at the end of the day, I have to calculate the costs 30 years upwards of upkeeping every investment. So I mean, it's just I'm not going to decide for an investment which looks good on paper, but which is then not going to be paying off. Okay, when I take decisions about transport infrastructure, sports infrastructure, I always think about whether it will pay off, because I don't want to be paying for 30 years, for something that is economically unfeasible. Now, when it comes to the steps that we are making on the ground, I mean, we are making a lot of steps, like promoting startups, creating those regulatory rules on our level that actually allow for some companies to thrive and so on and so forth. But to be honest, I mean, if we do not take courageous actions on the European Union level, I mean, we are always going to be left behind. I mean, let me just give you one example: artificial intelligence. I mean, are we going to have our own model? Are we going to adapt our rules accordingly? Are we going to go after the American companies so that they pay taxes in Europe and they actually subscribe to our model when it comes to the rights of the consumers and so on and so forth? Or are we going to just simply leave it as it is? Because if so, of course, we are not going to have any edge over the Chinese, who are not actually following any rules. I mean, look at facial recognition. I mean, they're hundreds of years ahead of us because they've been just using all of our data for free. And all of our secret agencies are secretly buying the software from the Chinese. So, I mean, this is a question of sort of, thinking what kind of rules should we have, and also using our clout when it comes to, for example, signing our trade deals in order to force others to follow some of our rules. Look at the Mercosur agreement. Are we really doing that? I mean, we are opening our markets because, our German colleagues want to sell their cars and our Spanish friends want to have their companies thriving in Latin America. But are we really then demanding the farmers of South America to pay for the carbon footprint that they are going to make by transporting their meat to Europe? Are we really protecting our market and our farmers? Are we really imposing our rules on them when it comes to let's use technology or artificial intelligence? That's the problem, and that's, again, last thing I want to say: hypocrisy. Because if you talk to the farmers and you tell them you need to apply those incredibly stringent rules on GMO and so on and so forth, and reporting environmental standards, and then you open up all of our markets for produce which doesn't meet any of our standards, and then we're wondering why are they pissed off. So that's the thing that we need to sort of adapt in order to be truthful.
Thank you. That we can finish on time. 2 minutes, Markku Markkula.
Let me just say that we actually do need more political entrepreneurship as well. So a kind of commitment that at least I could do this or you could do that. So bring some new fresh ideas and try to move on. Learn something from what we have, a couple of the success stories on the startups and scale up, so on. So what do we need? But then we need a bit longer term vision as well. So it's not only that what will happen during the next term of office, can we keep on our role on this, be re-elected? And that's how to find the balance of that. So we need to use the knowledge, because now we have all the global knowledge is within our reach. If we have time enough to focus on that, if we use the modern technology, digitalization, AI more and more, it brings easier and much faster in my computer, but I need to spend my time on thinking, is that what I want? Does that include the elements that I've been pushing forward during my last 10, 20 years and so on? How to change this? So my point is really this kind of entrepreneurial mindset that can bring something added value on the European politics. And that is something that we need to be ready with the largest political group, EPP, to invest a bit more on this. Let some of us to do something and try to make some new outcomes, actually, in a way, based on what the Draghi said, that Europe needs this and this if we want to be globally competitive, if we want to help the other parts of the world as well to move on with the climate and the other burning challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Markkula. Mr. Pagoyannis?
Well, I'll be very, very quick. Once again, many thanks for the invitation. I greatly enjoyed this conversation. I loved the expression, the concept of entrepreneurial policy making. Now, and I was thinking, what does entrepreneurial policy making require? Well, it requires decentralization, decentralizing responsibility. Why? It's very simple, almost childish, because we need more minds rather than less minds. What are we doing in Europe? Exactly the opposite. We nationalize responsibility. We centralize responsibility. This is a return to the 19th century. We live at the time of networks and not of the time of hierarchies. We need to invest in AI. We need to invest in technology. We need to invest in defense, in security. We need to do something about demographics, which means that we need to communicate with our children. Are we doing all that? If we want to be very honest, no, we're failing. So this, at the end of the day, and this I think is also a very good argument about our political party. Now is the time to open up. And open up begins with listening and begins with giving our hands rather than just waving the finger.
Excellent. Madam President, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for this discussion. It's a debate because here we are listening and speaking. But quite often it happens that we are only speaking and then forget the other thing. Well, as we've heard, the Europe starts in local and regional level. We are saying it in the Sunday speeches, but we should actually do it, and it's happening there. We need more Europe, but it's not the same everywhere. We share the same objectives, but we need to get all the brains working, as Kostas very wisely said. We need Europe to function with all its engines, and we need to trust each other. And that's to build the trust. We need more debate. We need more discussions, and we need shared management, shared responsibility. Sorry, Rafa, I'm again using the jargon. Regions and cities are flexible and agile, much more than perhaps other layers. And you said very nicely about accelerate the speed. We're closer to the everyday life. It's easier to accelerate there, and that's what we need to do. Go on. Let's stop talking and let's start doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Always this discussion, at least one tries to get many ideas, but at least one. And I liked what Trzaskowski said. So let's put it this way. My impression, or what I got from this discussion in the regional level, the whole thing is seen, this transition is seen much more positively, because as you said, the regional level, they don't do anything stupid. Like we have to be pragmatic, it has to be, but it has to make sense economically, financially. Or they do less and less, and that brings in conceptually. That brings us to the key concept of our movement is of course the subsidiarity. And to conclude, obviously, as said many times, it's not about that we don't agree on the basic goal, the decarbonization, but it's about we have to be critical and pragmatic about how to get there. And now we in the EPP we have the great responsibility that. So I think it was outstanding discussion. Our online viewers, thank you for following us. There are plenty of them. I would like to thank the speakers, the panel, and of course you, the audience, for being with us, and looking for the next time to have you in our event. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you.